The purpose of pain. Hi, I'm Anne-Margaret with this week's Sacred Sunday message to raise the vibration of your body, mind, and spirit. What a topic for a Sunday morning, right? Thanks for joining me. I promise these 15 minutes will help to redefine and reshape your relationship to one of the most difficult aspects of being human. So thanks for joining me. For the image today, I used an image of the famous board game Operation, which many of you might have played as children. I know I did. And even my best girlfriend, Mary, we've been best friends since we were born. She actually became a surgeon. So a little nod to her today, not off, but nod to her today with this, because when you're playing that game of Operation, what happens? Right? You're trying to extract something and you've got this metal, and if it touches the other piece of metal, then there's a buzz and the nose lights up, and it directs you back to that you're off course, and even though this is a really cute example and a really cute image from a board game, a child's board game, I thought it was very appropriate, because what does pain do? What's the purpose of pain? That's the whole talk today. It really helps us get back on track. But I know that sounds a little trite because we're talking about something very difficult that we all deal with. So today we're going to look at the types of pain that we suffer from, the origins of that pain, and then how to shift the relationship that we have to that pain. Because if we are just trying to avoid it, run from it, or numb it in some way, we are going to miss out on the gift that is wrapped in it. I know that sounds a little masochistic. So thanks for joining me. Let's dive in a little bit more deeply, okay? So let's talk about the kinds of pain that we have. Okay, physical and the physical body, it's such an obvious example of this. Whether it be muscular pain, joint pain, it could be more of a chronic disease pain, or acute, maybe you got an accident, something that's a little bit more short-lived. But also there can be a physical rejection of the body, like an actual physical rejection of the body. That kind of gets into the more of the mental and emotional pain I'm going to discuss. And in the notes, I've also put a bunch of links to different essential oils, even a cleanse that I'm going to do in May around gut health, because I think it's something like over 90% of our melatonin that, what helps us keep an uplifted mindset, or can't think of the word, but our hormones, right? To be able to be in a balanced state with our hormones, over 90% of that is found in the gut. And most of us, our guts are very unhealthy. They're imbalanced. So we can't underestimate our physical health, our physical well-being as it relates to the pain we experience on a physical, mental, and emotional, and even spiritual realm. So the physical, right, when we have these different things, and even I put in the oils like different things for arthritic pain or muscular pain, but also mental pain. Let's go to mental pain next. So mental pain is so common. I mean, there is a reason why over 1 in 4 women in their 40s and 50s is on antidepressants. There is a mental and emotional relatedness there. We don't know what to do with the thoughts that we have, with the false beliefs that we have, with the self-doubt that we have. And we talk in yoga, you might hear about mantras. Mantras are just something that are said over and over again, and that's what shapes our reality. So with a mantra, it could be empowering, it could be disempowering. It could be something that makes you feel good about yourself. It makes you feel motivated or connected to your soul, connected to source or God or others, to your partner, to your children. Or it could be something that disconnects you. So it's very important to know what the thoughts are going through in our minds, because those thoughts shape our reality based on our belief system that we create around them. And sometimes those thoughts are not too conscious, right? They'll just kind of run around in our head all day. And then we'll realize we're exhausted because we've just been stressing about something and thinking negatively about something. So mental pain is a very real thing. Also, mental pain is comparison. Thinking that you should be somebody else or something else, or trying to be something other than who you are. Now, that doesn't That doesn't negate self-growth or an expansion, or here to learn and grow and develop ourselves. But we have to remember that nobody knows what it's like to be in our shoes, and we don't know what it's like to be in anyone else's. If we can remember that little tiny truth, that we are separate, we are having a separate experience, then we can honor where we are and not try and run towards something else, and really reject what our struggle is ourselves. Okay, so comparison is really the death of all joy, honestly. And we don't have any guidebook for this, too, right? We're just kind of navigating this. We don't get this guidebook like we do somewhat with our physical body when we're younger, about how to take care of your mental health, how to take care of your brain, how to utilize your brain so that it really works for you. So let's go to emotional health. Again, no guidebook, right? So our emotional body, and I've done a whole talk on how we can relate to our emotions, so I'm not going to get into that here as much. But overall, we typically either glorify this emotion or demonize that one. And if we are in truly of the faith that divine God is in everything, then that can be the vehicle or the framework in which we really see and learn how to navigate our emotional body. Because grief, rage, anger, all of these things can be the source of great pain if we're in the state of rejecting them, or thinking that they're wrong, or thinking that they're bad. Okay, so in rejection of those heavier, negative, some people say darker emotions, in that rejection of it, that can be the source of our pain right there. Okay, we are human. We don't get the guidebook to being human, but we know being human is feeling painful emotion. So just the resistance to that can be this root of that emotional pain. And lastly, spiritual pain. Disconnect from others, disconnect from God, disconnect from our own sovereignty, of understanding the miracle that we are, just our physical bodies, miracle, the brain, the miracle that we are, the ability that we have to create our lives. So the disconnect that we have from God, whatever name you give that energy, it makes no difference. It's that constant source of interconnectivity, of relationship to that universal wisdom. Even the shadow aspect of that is having false idols. Having false idols, spiritual pain is that root of having false idols, worshiping things like money, fame, others' affirmation or approval, rather than staying true to our soul's purpose. And then also false projections that we have onto this concept of God, or the reality of God in our lives. How are we projecting false images or very human aspects onto God that are limiting the energy of that and the role that that plays in our life? So whether we be Christian, whether we be Hindi, whether we be Buddhist, Muslim, Jewish, whatever that relatedness that we have, and I'm an interfaith minister, so I've studied all the world religions and learning how to create the common denominator between them. How do we call on that Christ-like energy or that divine interconnectivity to help us repair our relationship to ourselves, to our family members, to our friends, and to that relationship that we can have with God? So looking at now the origins of pain, okay? The origins of pain. Buddha said it very beautifully and very succinctly. The root of all suffering is, can you guess? Can you guess? The root of all suffering is resistance. Resistance. Very simple. The root of all suffering is resistance. That is resistance to circumstance, the way things are, the way that we are, the way that the human journey is, the way that we have emotions, the way that we have desires, the way that we have disappointments, right? Resistance. And also, I've been lately revisiting Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, because it's so appropriate right now, and looking at World War II, looking at a lot of parallels that are happening in our country and our government, the way that things are unfolding right now. You'd have to be completely void of all knowledge of history to not be alarmed by what's going on in our own country right now in America. And so I'm rereading the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and this is a man, and I've put links and also the notes here about him, his biography, and also the link to this particular book, because he was a neurologist, a psychiatrist, a philosopher. He founded what's called logotherapy, which is logos is the Latin word for meaning. So his therapy is all around finding meaning in things, and how we are misinterpreting our lives by projecting the wrong meaning, or not coming up with enough of a meaning, enough of a why, to make sense of our own suffering, make sense of our own lives. And this is a guy who survived 4 concentration camps, right? So it's something that is very good. If you have not read this book, I highly, highly recommend it. But what I find fascinating about what he talks about regarding suffering, and I'm going to read this because this is a quote from his book. He said, "Suffering is omnipresent. It's similar to the behavior of the element of gas. So if you release a small amount of gas in a room or a large amount of gas in a room, it will behave the same way. Suffering will behave the same way in our soul. It will reach the furthest ends of the room and disperse evenly, whether it be a small concentration or a large concentration of gas that you release into a room." Okay? So suffering behaves in the same way. It is very it's unbelievable how we can compare our suffering to another and therefore invalidate it or glorify it, but it behaves the same way. So he says, similarly, suffering fills the human soul and conscious mind, no matter whether the suffering is great or little. Therefore, the size of human suffering is absolutely relative. How often do you suffer by saying, "Oh, well, this isn't that big of a deal. My childhood wasn't that bad. I have it pretty good." So you invalidate your own suffering by negating its relativity to somebody else's. Okay, this is a huge, huge trap. And I love that he talks about this, especially this is coming from a guy who suffered and survived 4 concentration camps, right? So he has quite an incredible experience as far as his vastness of suffering, his experience. But he's saying, as far as the human mind, as a neurologist, as a psychiatrist, as a philosopher, and founder of logotherapy, he's saying it doesn't matter. We have to remember that. It doesn't matter. What we're suffering with is what we're suffering from, and we need to recognize that, okay? But he also says something that I think is really phenomenal, and he says, I'll get into that next, because we're now shifting into how do we shift our relationship to pain, because, we're in a very different relatedness right now than we were 100 years ago, than we were 300 years ago, and yet people are still, the suicide rate is off the charts. People are on antidepressants, right? All of these things are huge contributors to our quality of life or detractors from it. So he says, another great quote of his is, he says, every age has its own collective neuroses. And that age, and every age, needs its own psychotherapy to cope with it. So we can't use the same things now that we used 50 years ago. We can't even use things now that we used 20 years ago, because today is a very different age. We are moving through a very different world. Kids today are not struggling with things that I struggled with as a child. It's very, very different. So every age has its own neuroses, and every age must have its own psychotherapy, must have its own way of relating to pain, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual pain. So I put also in the notes my favorite passage, something that has transformed my relationship to pain, and that is the passage from The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. Click in the notes, it'll take you to a passage in his book. It's brilliant. But how do we shift our relationship to pain? We must accept it. See it in that glorification that God or that divine touches everywhere. Whatever we're struggling with, if we're saying this is of God, this is not of God, and like I said, use your own word for that, then we're going to struggle. We're going to struggle with even more so in the relationship to that pain, rather than extract its gift to us, rather than alchemize and turn that lead into gold, turn that pain into perspective, into empowerment. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger, right? We know that. We hear that all the time. So Khalil Gibran says the pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses our understanding. If we can shift our relationship to pain and be in awe of it like it's a teacher, just like joy, just like pleasure, just like love, then our pain would not seem less wondrous than our joy. How do we do that? Because it is a teacher. It is something that is shaping our life in a very beautiful way. And he said, much of your pain is self-chosen. As a soul, we are choosing our path. We're choosing what we're struggling with. And not consciously, like egoically, like, ooh, I'm going to sign up for this pain. But our soul comes into this body to experience, to create, to grow. And we must remember that it's not just the ego's preference that we're creating from. We're creating from a very unconscious, soul, expanded place of being able to understand what it is we're going through. So I know, you guys, it's tough. I know pain is really, really tough. But if we resist it, then we're in a state of suffering. If we're attaching ourselves that this is the way that life should be, and this is not the way that life should be, then we're in a state of suffering immediately. And suffering is optional. Pain is not. If you've noticed, pain is not. So have courage. Reach out to me if you're struggling in your relationship. I do couples counseling. I do relationship coaching. Physicality, like understanding the body and how the gut, right? Remind yourself. Reach out to me if you're interested. I put my email in the notes in case you're interested in that cleanse that I'm starting in May, okay, around gut health, because over 90% of melatonin is found in the gut. And if our gut is not functioning properly, it could be the reason why you're so depressed. It could be the reason that you lack the energy or the drive or the faith to be effective in your day-to-day life. So reach out to me, guys. Have a beautiful, beautiful day, a beautiful rest of your weekend. Tonight is the Women's Circle, so join me for that, and all the notes for oils around joint pain, muscular pain, all of it, like not forgiving, dealing with grief are all in the notes. So thanks for joining me today, and I will see you next time. Feel free to share this video. Help me spread the word of helping people understand how to deal with pain. Until next time, keep raising the vibration. Bye, everybody.